Well, it's my great pleasure today to be with this person, and this is Mr. Jim Perrin. Hello, Jim, how are you?
I'm quite well, thank you very much. I'm very happy to be in one of my home and special places.
Well, when you say that, Jim, to a great extent, it is a welcome back home, isn't it? It's a welcome back to Wales,
Yes.
because you spend quite a bit of your time now in, you can pronounce it better than I can.
Well, I live in the French Pyrenees. I live in Acclaimed, which is a place that reminds me of the Wales of 50 years ago. It's a quiet, slow, backward, rural place with very few facilities, a very dwindling and ageing population, little infrastructure, no people, no crowds. And I like that about it, being slightly reclusive in my old age.
Well, for the purposes of this interview, Jim, I wondered whether it would be good to concentrate our minds on Wales, the affinity that you certainly have for the landscape, and probably the people, and also the language. And it's talk about something that you've mentioned before we started this interview, and that was the sense of belonging. Now, of course, you were born and grew up in Manchester, yes?
Yes, I was. And when you talk about a sense of belonging, there's something that precedes that, which is the sense of the scattering, which I think is common to all peoples. It's this notion of the diaspora, the people who are scattered. The Jews certainly had it. My people, who are Huguenots, who were expelled from France after the revocation of the Edict of Nantes, somehow, by some process, eventually ended up in Denbighshire, and my grandparents came from there. They moved from there to Salford, and I was brought up in inner city Manchester in the period after the war. And even that landscape in which I was briefly settled in my childhood, by the time I was 10, had completely gone. It was razed away in the slum clearances. So my background no longer exists. I'm a stateless person, a rootless person, if you like. So what I did about that was seek out my immediate ancestry, the place of my immediate ancestry, the notional Wales of which I'd heard from my grandparents, from my aunts, who told me about this magical, mythical country full of stories. And that was a place when I was in my very early teens to which I was determined to find my way back. So I set out in weekends, in school holidays, with very little in the way of money or equipment, just to walk into Wales, into this country of myth, into this country of potential belonging, which had the suggestion always of the place from which I'd come for me. And what I found here was a landscape utterly different to the urban landscape in which I'd been brought up for those first 10 years. I found a very peaceful, very beautiful, very natural place, which gave me such sustenance as a city child and as an impoverished city child. I found here things which didn't exist in the cities and which captivated me and which still captivate me. And I think what I'm working towards here is the very Welsh sense, which is expressed in a phrase, dyn o filltir sgwâr, a man of his own square mile. Now, if you live in a city, then you don't really have your own square mile. You have this crowded place, and you can never know everything about it because it's closeted, compartmentalised. People are living in their little boxes. When you live in a place like this, you come to know it much more intimately. You come to know the creatures that move here, the plants that grow here, the insects that fly here. You become much more deeply entrenched, associated, knowledgeable about it. And this particular place, now this lake, for example, is only 50 years old. It looks as though it's been here throughout eternity. It was built 50 years ago by the farmer. He built a dam across the end of a swampy hollow, and the lake filled up behind it. He built it for his water supply. And since then, what I've seen over 50 years with this lake, I first came here when I was probably 13, 14, is the filling in of a landscape, the enriching of it. If I look at it now, even since the last time I came here, which is not very long ago, what I see now, today, is that it's being colonised by water crowfoot, these lovely white flowers here. And there are goldcrests in the pines over there. The swifts come here, the swans are nesting here. And it's become the most rich and wonderful habitat now. It's become a different landscape, an enriched landscape. And I find in that a parallel to my own life, which was enriched by coming to Wales, to finding this landscape. So my own square mile of Wales is a square mile that within myself, within my own soul, has been enriching. And I think that's why I feel such a rootedness now here. It gives so much to me. This landscape is so wonderful, it's so various, there's so much happening in it. And it's also a landscape with characteristics that we as 21st century humans ignore at our peril. I had a very interesting conversation yesterday with a botanist who was telling me about the tradition within rural Wales of letting loose the heavy horses when they were ailing into a field which was known as Caesbwti, the hospital field. And this field, there's no sense of a hospital, of a building about this field. It was simply a field in its original state. It was a flower-rich meadow in an unaltered natural state, which had never been treated with pesticides or fertilizers or anything like that. And he would set his heavy horses loose into this field, and they would self-medicate, they would cure themselves. And when you think that in the last 60 years, in this country, we've lost 99% of our flower-rich meadows, you wonder exactly what we're doing to our own potential for health, for vitality, what we're doing to our ability to resist sickness, what we're doing to destroy the subtle interdependencies of nature upon which we rely and upon which increasingly we know the secret of life depends. Life itself depends. If we don't preserve these places, I wonder what will happen to us, and I fear for that.
Now, you mentioned the Farmer's Lake, Jim, and at the end of this interview, what I'll do is just pan around so the viewers can see the lake in all its beauty. But there's many special areas, aren't there?
Flycatcher.
There's many special areas in Wales, aren't there?
Oh, Wales is a special area. Not just many, it is a special area, the whole of Wales. And that's a cultural thing as well. It's, it's to do with the people, it's to do with the long history of the people, it's to do with the events that have taken place here. I think it's the most wonderfully rich country in terms of story, legend, culture. I don't know of anywhere as rich, in fact. I think certainly English culture pales by comparison. Metropolitan culture certainly has nothing of comparable wealth and resonance.
Now, you've had a good varied living in Wales as well, haven't you, in various places?
Yes, I'm a vagrant. I think I'm a gypsy, actually. I think my gene pool is Romany. I don't think it's Huguenot, really.
Because many years ago, if I can take you back to possibly some of the early years that you came into Wales to live, was it based around Cwm Pennant?
I did live, I lived and worked as a shepherd in Cwm Pennant for 4 years in the mid-70s, in my hippie phase, about which you would know Myrddyn. If you don't know this, viewers, he's got a long white ponytail.
Something Jim accused me of when we first met, rather humorously.
Yes, I like hippies.
I do as well, Jim. Cwm Pennant, it's rather a beautiful area, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah. It is. You know the Avion Wyn line. Pam arglwydd y gwneithos cwmpenant mor glws a bwyd hen fi cael mor fir. Why, Lord, did you make cwmpenant so beautiful and the life of the old shepherd so short? You certainly have that slightly hackneyed sense. Whenever you go into Cwmpenant, it's an eternal place and an eternally beautiful place. It's something to do with the rhythm of the skyline. It's the most beautiful swooping skyline that you could almost notate as music. You could almost write it as a piece of music. So swooping and lovely. You'd have to write it in B flat.
But you spent much of your youthful days again around, would it be around the Llanberis area?
Well, I was a climber then. I was a keen climber, and you look for the vertiginous as a climber. When you're young and you want the challenges, you look for the steepest rock faces, and in Wales, they, at that time, were around Llanberis. So yes, that was where I spent a lot of time when I was in my teens, 20s, 30s, 40s.
And in later
50s.
years, coming more so down into mid Wales?
Yes, I looked for a quieter place. I looked for a place apart, and eventually, one of the places that I stayed most frequently for longest was Dyffryn-Tynant, which is still well-speaking, still a quiet place and a rural place, an agricultural community. And I do love it there. It's still an original place. That's one of my, that's one of the fields within my Villta Sgwâr. It's one of the places to which I return perpetually.
And if you came back to Wales, which I suspect you will.
Oh, Hiraeth always brings you back. You can't keep away from Wales for long. You might need to go away for restorative, recuperative, convalescent reasons, because the Welsh climate is so truly dreadful. But that apart, you always come back. No question about that. And I've been away now for getting on for 4 years, I suppose. So it's time to come back probably soon. You wouldn't want to die anywhere but in Wales. Wales is my long home.
And where would that take you, Jim? Do you know what area of Wales?
Well, that's a leading question, and I'm not quite sure about that. It would have to be one of the quieter places, and there are fewer and fewer of those left, because a lot of Wales is being, again, colonised by that. There's a wonderful phrase from Gwenallt, from a poem called Rhyd Cymera, where he speaks of the bratiaith Saeson y de, the corrupt whine of the southern English, and there's too much of that in Wales, and too many of the associated bourgeois values, and I don't want to be around that. So if and when I do come back, I suspect it would be to some area like rural Ceredigion, somewhere far apart from the gluts of the English colonists.
Now, part of a little bit that you've touched upon, Jim, I think, is Wales has a very, very separate feel, doesn't it, to England?
It's a separate country, it's a separate nation, it's a separate culture. It's an old culture. It's a much older country.
But what always amazes me is that...
It's the original country.
Well, it is, yes, but I always find it's quite unusual, I suppose, that you have quite a dominant neighbour, and yet certainly Welsh as a language still exists. It thrives in many areas, and even after many, many hundreds of years of dominance coming from England.
Yes, but the culture east of the border is such a brutal, Philistine, materialistic one that who in their good senses would want anything to do with that? So, much rather hold to Glad Gynefin, prose Heaven, my home country is a land of sun and stars, this side of the border. This is the magical country, this is where the resonance and the beauty lies. Over there you've just got competition, materialism, acquisition, all the base activities of humankind, you engage with immediately you cross the border into England. And sorry to be racist, but I don't want to go there. I don't much like the 21st century English and their culture. It slightly nauseates me, I'm afraid.
What about the Welsh language, Jim? Was it self-taught or?
There was Welsh in my youth. There was in my childhood. There were Welsh-speaking people in my family, and obviously travelling through Wales as a young boy, when I was 12 or 13 or 14, I was making mammoth walking tours through Wales and encountering the local people and picking Welsh up from them. And then when I went to university, I did do Welsh as one of my subjects. So, and I feel a sense of belonging within certainly the Anglo-Welsh cultural community. I write in English, but that's because my Welsh is insufficiently expressive or correct to write adequately for my own purposes.
And of course, as far as your writing is concerned, I know you have a monthly column in TGO magazine.
I've got quite a few. I've got a country diary in The Guardian. I've got the TGO column. I do a column in Climber and various other things. As a jobbing hack writer, you have to do as much as you can.
How do you keep up with the pressure, Jim? I don't know.
I put one foot in front of the other and keep on going. Because when you stop, you die. So.
Well, as far as your other writing is concerned, I know that recently you've had another book published, haven't you?
Last year,
West.
The paperback's just come out.
Yeah.
Which is a book about grief, essentially. It's about the loss of the two people I most dearly loved. My eldest son and a woman I lived with. My son committed suicide and my woman died of cancer within 9 months of each other, and I was left annihilated by grief, and I had to find a way out of that, and did so through engagement with nature, through coming to a deep understanding of the nature of transience in human life. And also I came to a sense that yes, all life passes, and the way that we can endure that most surely is by celebrating the joys of it, even though the joys are past, celebrating the shared joys, remembering them, memorializing those that we have loved in a loving way, not allowing animus or venom to be expressed, but just to remember the people we knew in the most loving manner we can, and hence to convey an impression of their continued existence in our own hearts to everyone who cares to listen. So in West, I was trying to help those who've been in a similar situation to myself, because bereavement is something we will all face, with which we'll all have to come to terms. We're all either going to be lost to those who love us, or we are going to lose those whom we love. And we have to come to terms with that. There's no point in going into negative emotions around it, allowing angry ghosts to clamour around us. We have to engage with it fully and honestly. And I think we do that by celebration. I think we do that through a properly loving response to memory and to the continuing life, both of those persons in memory and of the world itself, because the nature of transience is, yes, things die, but other things are born, and the world goes on, and we have to go on. Certainly after my two loved ones died, I didn't want to go on. I was annihilated by these events. I was grieving and destroyed by it. I was not a capable person, or a sane person, I suppose. I was howling in the night in grief. But when you come through that, you do come at a sense of the world going on. You do re-encounter the moments of glory, the moments of beauty, and are restored by them. You never lose the sense of your loved ones being lost to you, of their having ceased to exist, their extinction, if you like. But you do have the sustaining sense that here's the world's beauty still. Over there there's a duck leading her ducklings across the lake, and there's the rippling water, and there's the wind in the bulrushes, and the song of the larks. There is so much beauty in the world, and that still gives us cause for joy. We can still reach the joy even though we may be infinitely sad. And what I was doing, what I was hoping to do in West was giving people something to hold to in their dark moments, in their bleak moments, some restorative sense, some sense that yes, there are dark times, but those dark times don't last forever, and life is a process that is endlessly self-renewing and endlessly beautiful at times, and you must hold to the beauty and not allow yourself to descend into the negative and the ugly and the venomous, the spiteful, any of that stuff. Leave all that aside, have nothing to do with it, and hold to the beauty, hold to the fulfillment of life, which is in its regenerative capacity, in the beauty of this place, which now in its early summer loveliness is perfection. But winter will come and spring will come again thereafter.
I think it's always remember the good memories, Jim.
Yes, exactly that, yeah. And remember also that you're a part of this world. You're a part of it. You belong within it. And things within the world die, you will die, the world will go on, the world will replenish itself. But protect and care for that world by a loving response to it in every significant area of it.
Well, Jim, I think, for now, on those words, it's probably a fine moment, to end this interview.
Well, thank you very much, Myrddyn. You always keep you with your white ponytail. It's been a great pleasure, thank you.
Well, cheers, Jim.
And I've never been on YouTube before, I don't think.
Well, it'll be
There you go.
it'll be quite something for YouTube. If I can just ask, Jim, before we end, you mentioned the lake. Now, when we finish the interview, I'll just pan around to show the viewers where we are. But if you can describe where we are in relation to Wales, what part of Wales are we in?
We're in Radnorshire, which is one of the special Welsh counties. It's still rather a quiet place. It's still a spacious country of rolling hillsides. It's one of the eastern counties of Wales, and it's between Herefordshire and Brecon Shire. And it's a place I find particularly lovely. I walked through here when I was a young boy, and I come back here continually. I like the pace of life here, which is very slow.
And the hill range, the name?
They call the Begons.
The Begons.
Yeah.
And I think translated into English, is it beacons?
Yes, it would be the beacons, but
Yeah.
not the Brecon beacons, which are invaded by the military every day. These are the Begons. There are a little range of hills between the valley of the Wye and the valley of the Bach Hwy, the little Wye. So they're between Glaisbury and Paynes Castle.
Well, Jim, it's been an absolute delight to speak with you today. So, Jim Perrin, many thanks.
Thank you, Myrddyn. Wales has the highest density raven population in the world, and there are two of them.